Welcome to Over the Horizon, a Bitcoin podcast. Today I'm here with Bram, host of Bitcoin for Millennials. Bram, how are you?
All good, man. Thanks so much for having me on. It's an honor. I wanted to start by saying I think you're doing absolutely fantastic with these like daily updates and a podcast. So I'm happy to chat today.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Doing what I can with what I've been given. There's a lot to discuss. Tucker Carlson, and this is the first thing we'll discuss. Tucker Carlson, widely respected intellectual among the American right. But as is the case, as we were discussing before, when it comes to Bitcoin, a lot of the great thinkers of our era seem to be detractors for whatever reason. Tucker Carlson just came out and said that he thinks Bitcoin was created by the CIA. So what's your reaction to that?
I think first reaction is not even about what he says, and perhaps this goes into a different direction with the conversation, but when the guy who asks the question in the audience, when he asks the question, you hear like the honing in the audience, like, oh, it's a Bitcoin question. And it reminded me of when, I don't know, it's kind of like well-known entrepreneur had like a commencement speech at a university. You remember that, like 18 months, like 2 years ago. And like the whole stadium, he said something about Bitcoin is something for your future. And then the whole stadium was booing and saying like, what is this? And it reminded me of that, right? Like it is so interesting that many people, when they go to the grocery stores, a watermelon is $20 or whatever. Like I always use that example, but stuff is getting more expensive, and there's a serious problem also with the debt in the US. Of course, that's stuff that you also talk about a lot. And I find it just so interesting that people dismiss Bitcoin so easily, and I think that is an uphill battle that we have in general, right? Like the whole affinity with crypto, the gambling, the FTX blow up, etc. Like it didn't do justice to what Bitcoin can bring to people. So that was actually the first thing that I noticed. But also in the answer of Tucker, like what just really surprises me is that, like I told you before we started recording, like he had 90 minutes with Saylor, which I think was a great conversation. He had like 2 hours with Richard Werner, who is also like a well-known economist, who explained to him how the creation of money is fake, out of thin air, etc. There were like clips from that conversation where you saw Tucker really being mind blown by the fact that the money is fake and doesn't really exist, etc. And so, I mean, for both of us, these were, I'd say, things along our Bitcoin journey that kind of triggered our curiosity and made us go deeper and trying to figure out like, okay, is the money actually fake? Where does that come from? How does that work? What is the purpose, etc. And it seems that, Tucker didn't really take that step, which, like you said, also surprises me with regard to all the other stuff that he's done, right? So I find it, I don't know, I'm kind of on the edge. I told you just now, like I had a conversation today where someone else said about Tucker, like, oh, well, maybe he's compromised because like that answer is just, so out of touch with how people look at him. And especially when people who look at him are also into Bitcoin, like they see something that is not genuine, the rest is pure speculation. On the other side, like you said to me before we started recording, maybe he read something from someone he respected more, and that sounded logical. But then again, if you talk about the topic, did the CIA create Bitcoin? I always ask myself, with what purpose? Besides the fact that it doesn't matter because it's an open source computer protocol. So the only purpose that I saw someone tweet today is like, okay, so they held on for 15 or 16 years through this journey of this random magic internet coin that could have died 10,000 times before today, but it still survived in an organic way. The president is talking about it. Pension funds are into it. BlackRock is into it, all these things. And what they're going to do is move Satoshi's coins. That was like the thing I saw today where I was like, okay, maybe they could do that, and then what, right? Because if they sell, the market buys. If they move, maybe people are scared. That would damage Bitcoin. But then again, what would be the purpose of something like this, like almost multi-decade project, exposing all the flaws of fiat money, the entire financial system of the US, to then eventually do what? That's not really clear to me. I wonder what you think.
Yeah, to me, it's an argument that has very little basis. There are theories that maybe it did come out of someone who was working at the CIA and they decided to release it into the wild. But even if it did, for me, it doesn't matter, right? Because Bitcoin's origins do not matter because its monetary policy and its protocol set are fully auditable. If you think Bitcoin was created by the CIA, so what? right? There's no central governing authority who can change its rules. Right now, there's a war going on between the people, between the node runners and the thought leaders in Bitcoin around how if its monetary policy should be changed. It's not coming from some kind of centralized authority. And so centralization risk is not something that Bitcoin has. And so I don't get this obsession over who created Bitcoin or who runs Bitcoin. I think it comes down to a lack of education and a general misconception about the way Bitcoin runs. I've done some thinking on this, and I believe it comes from this notion that's not true, that people think Bitcoin is governed centrally by a board of directors and its monetary supply is governed by a central authority, and therefore they don't trust it because they don't know who those people are. When in reality, the anonymity of Bitcoin's founder is irrelevant because there's no central authority. He has no claim over Bitcoin's monetary policy. It boils down to a lack of understanding of what this asset is. And you're right, I don't think FTX did us any favors, or Celsius, or BlockFi, or Terra Luna. The more that crypto attaches itself to the coattails of Bitcoin, the worse it looks in the public zeitgeist. And this meme around what Bitcoin people are like is largely governed by crypto people, right? These affinity scammers, when in reality, Bitcoin is just trying to create a better world for everyone. And we'll talk more about that, but I'm curious to hear if you have any response.
Yeah, a few points. I think we could go anywhere with this conversation, by the way. I think, the education on Bitcoin is one. Obviously, it's not easy to understand because you also have to understand the problem that it's eventually solving, right? So what you said about a central authority that controls a certain monetary policy, that is exactly the fiat money system, right? And I think people know or feel perhaps that, some people have more control or power within this system that doesn't necessarily benefit you and me personally. And that obviously is the problem. The fact that Bitcoin works in a certain way, and that is not known to people, I think, could be an educational issue. I've also heard that some people still think the US dollar is backed by gold, right? If that would be true, that a certain percentage of people still think that, then we have a very long way to go with regard to Bitcoin education, right? So I agree, it is not easy. That's why I'm spending my time on it. I think this is the biggest thing that technological battle that could take place in the world, right? The replacement of the technology of money, and the fact that people feel the problem and have a certain view towards the future, but not necessarily are able to understand where that is coming from, I think shows the magnitude of what we're trying to do here. Next to that, what you mentioned about the monetary policy, like that is the whole conceptual idea, right? It is a concept. It is manifested in the reality with the miners and the node runners and the energy now towards it. But even if that goes down, you have difficulty adjustments, stuff like that. But just conceptually, the idea of Bitcoin can never, ever die again. So therefore, I also think that it's illogical to think that the CIA created it, because it just lays bare all the problems, the perverse incentives, and all the negative things that occur when we actually use a fiat money system, right? So I don't know, like strategically, that doesn't really make sense. Again, I don't know what they would want to.
Yeah. I mean, maybe if the CIA did create Bitcoin, the most probable scenario in my mind would be some kind of Edward Snowden type, a dissident person who disagreed with the way the fiat money system ran. They had a certain architecture, they had things they were working on within the CIA, and they decided to release this thing into the wild in the same way that Edward Snowden decided to become a whistleblower, right? That would be the most probable outcome in my mind. But I don't think it even matters because it's out of their hands now, number one. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't even get to the point of like this notion that Tucker trotted out and a lot of Bitcoin detractors trotted out, which is that, okay, Bitcoin was invented by the CIA in order to, re-cement US dollar hegemony. Well, that's not remotely true, because what has Bitcoin done over the last 16 years, right? It's not to reassert US dominance. In fact, it's to draw capital and power away from the United States and the United States dollar and the Keynesian economic system and into something that's better, into this neutral currency that could one day serve as a better reserve currency than the dollar. So the basis of that claim that Bitcoin was created to cement US dollar hegemony and cement US hegemony globally doesn't hold any water when you've seen what it's done over the last 16 years. The purpose of a system is what it does, right? And so if the purpose of the system was to cement the United States dollar as the world's reserve currency, it's, this CIA operation has done a terrible job over the last 16 years of doing that.
I'll give you one theory because I don't know if you know, what's that called? Like Confessions of an Economic Hitman, the book, John Perkins, I think. Yeah, I think that's his name. He talks about like how the IMF is a multi-decade project, right? And they have multi-decade things that they do with countries, etc. So imagine that Bitcoin is a multi-decade strategic plan where they foresaw that the end of the US dollar, the hegemony is coming to an end, and we're going to a multipolar world, as is happening today, right? And that is also what a lot of countries and country leaders are talking about. We have the BRICS forming, etc. And so if they understood that eventually the fiat dollar ends in a multipolar world and there's no country that could actually take the role of the global power in the world and provide the world reserve currency, then eventually the need for something that would be neutral, decentralized, digital, being able to trade with instant final settlement all over the world would become a bit more obvious, that need, right? So what if you create that and you are Satoshi and you have the million Bitcoin and you just wait 30 years and then, you have your part of power in the world? That would be the only thing that I could come up with. There's a lot of caveats with that, again, because Bitcoin could have died 10,000 times before today. So in that sense, this doesn't really make sense. But even if you had that, so you could have had that foresight and kind of like prepared for that, but then still there's so many things in that plan that could go wrong. And today we're seeing that they're pulling other levers, right? They're pushing other buttons with regard to trying to extend the dollar hegemony or at least slow roll the inevitable destruction of the US dollar. So, that's the only thing I could give to you. But again, a lot of caveats. Maybe another thing to pivot towards what I'm seeing in like these replies on X, right, where people are like, yeah, it's the CIA, it's the NSA, and they want to control us, and it's all bad, and that's why you need gold, and it's, it prepares us for the CBDC, and like dark, nihilistic. I think that is actually also very interesting to see. I don't know if you've talked a lot about this, but, nihilism is a symptom of fiat money. If you perpetually get more insecure about the future and you're more incentivized to be a consumer today rather than a builder, then you don't really have anything to look forward to, right? And I think you can attest to the fact that Bitcoin gives you hope for the future, that you actually see at least a certain path forward that lowers your anxiety and uncertainty towards the future because you have something that you can truly own, no one controls, et cetera, all the properties of Bitcoin. And I think it's just sad that this is why we're here. This is also kind of what drives me on one side, right? Like I want to tell other people, hence another Bitcoin podcast. But on the other side, we are very, very far away from getting to where we think we could go with Bitcoin. And that is kind of also what I'm seeing in these replies to tweets like that. It's just super nihilistic and no one has a solution, right? I don't see any solutions.
Yeah, no, the financial nihilism, the apex solution for that is an absolutely scarce bearer asset that is non-sovereign, politically neutral, and, can be widely distributed and is globally liquid. And Bitcoin fits the bill for all of those things, right? Gold does not. And I think that's a perfect transition into talking about gold. Gold, obviously, has been on a tear. I had Alex Thorne on my show yesterday, and he and I talked about, the fact that Bitcoin was underperforming relative to gold. We talked about the various reasons for that, but more importantly, we talked about the fact that gold is up 60-something% year to date, and then it drew down 10%. So unfortunately, it's clearly not a viable store of value because of its volatility. But anyway, just poking fun at the gold people. You've tweeted a lot about gold recently. In Gold's rally and poking fun at gold, one of your posts, you talked about gold having an infinite supply problem. The fact that not only have we not tapped all of Earth's gold, but gold can also be found in asteroids. So how does gold compare to Bitcoin? For anybody who may be seeing these two things and wondering why Bitcoin may not be outperforming, why does Bitcoin trounce gold in terms of its scarcity?
Yeah, I think it's nice to zoom in on that scarcity part. And I had some rebuttals on X. It was funny because a lot of TradFi people that are apparently into gold woke up and chose violence in the replies of those tweets. Also today I learned something new. I do think that the gold bugs, the people that are into gold, they see the same problem as we do, right? So in that sense, we are on the same team, we have the same thesis, but our solution is different. And I think how we approach the problem, and that is something that we use a lot in Bitcoin, right? Like, why would I spend my finite time and energy for a reward that another man can create infinitely? That infinitely part, I think, is something that is a big thing within the Bitcoin community, in a sense that people understand that conceptually, right? Okay, so that is infinite. The goal of fiat money is to be created infinitely. That is necessary to keep this whole system afloat. So what happens if you philosophically, conceptually think through a money based on scarcity? Okay, what is scarcity then? Is that something that inflates with 2% a year? Air quotes, right? It's not defined. 2% is, I don't even know where the 2% of gold comes from. I think that comes from research again. But this is the fun part with Bitcoin. When you go through further down the path of scarcity, Bitcoin is absolutely finite. It is programmed to have a max amount of units. And of course, you can divide them by 100 million subunits, which doesn't make it infinite, people. So if we cut a pizza in 100 million units, it's not an infinite pizza. And it's crazy you have to say stuff like that. But when you understand that Bitcoin is absolutely scarce and can actually and has an absolute finite supply and can function as a money, as you just mentioned, right? It's decentralized, global, instant final settlement. I can transfer it to you without a third party. That's the whole idea of Bitcoin. Anything else that I come across, I'm going to put next to that type of measurement. And so people that like gold say, it's scarce, it's durable, and all these things. Yes, it's durable, right? You can throw it in the mud, in the water, and 1,000 years later you can still find it. So you have all these other properties of money. But when we talk about the scarcity, and that is, I think, what a lot of people didn't understand about my tweet, and I wonder what you think. If something exists that is absolutely finite, it is by definition better than something that is conceptually scarce, right? Like, okay, there is a max amount of gold. I had a guy on LinkedIn. I will look up the comment. There's a max amount of mined, or there's a certain amount of gold mined in the world, right? And there is a max amount of gold that could still be mined. I will pull it up now. So I had a similar post on LinkedIn. I said, gold supply is not only conceptually infinite, it is infinite by definition. There's always more gold to be mined anywhere, literally, right? Even in space, eventually. Even if it's in 100 years, that doesn't matter, because that shows that there is more gold than you think there is.
There are companies right now who are actively planning over the next 2 years to intercept asteroids with remote mining equipment to get gold out of them.
Yeah.
So
it doesn't matter if they, So people want that, but it doesn't matter if they do it in 2, 5, or 100 years. That's my point. If they can actually do it on an asteroid, then the supply of gold is conceptually and by definition infinite. Bitcoin supply is absolutely finite by definition. So they aren't the same, and there is nothing like Bitcoin in this world. And I had this video of the Winklevoss twins talking to Dave Portnoy, where they said, like, this is the scarcest thing in the universe, or something like that. But then this gold guy replied. He said, gold in Earth's crust is fixed, approximately 244,000 metric tons, with around 60,000 tons that are economically viable to extract. Gold's natural inflation rate is 2% a year, until too expensive to extract. I mean, then I said, okay, but how do you know about the 244,000 metric tons? Do you know it's 244 0 metric tons, or is it 001 or 005? And that is the point, because with Bitcoin, we can exactly pinpoint how many Bitcoin there will be. We can even say how many Bitcoin there will be in May 2052, for example, right? And so that, I think, is what sometimes goes over people's heads. If you cannot actually say how scarce it is, maybe it's not scarce. So estimation by third parties is what you do with gold, or it's absolutely finite and you can verify that by yourself. So in that sense, they aren't even close. So that's
Of course, ultimately, I saw a good graphic. Diamond prices haven't done very well since the introduction and the economic viability of lab-grown diamonds. Gold can be synthesized, but it is economically prohibitive to do so. It's very expensive. But as the cost for gold synthesization goes down, synthesizing gold rather goes down, then naturally that will dampen its price. In the same way that in response to massive gold rallies like the one that we just saw, what happens to gold's supply schedule, meaning the amount of new supply created for gold, new miners get fired up. Granted, this takes a pretty long time. It's generally a 2 to 3 year timeline for the price reaction, the demand response to this increase in price, or the supply response to this increase to price, excuse me. But the point is that not only in response to price can more gold get ripped out of the earth, but also gold can be synthesized and it can be found in asteroids. And the amount of gold that is in the earth, to your point, it's a rough estimation. We have no way of knowing exactly how much there is. And so as these technologies develop, naturally gold's role as a scarce monetary asset will dissolve and Bitcoin will be the only player in town. Like if you compare gold's attributes and Bitcoin's attributes, they share a lot of the same things. Like you mentioned at the top of this, at the top of your response, we're on the same team. We recognize the exact same problem, fiat money, and we recognize the exact same solution, sound money. We just have two different ways of going about it, right? You have the Lawrence Lepards of the world who are on both sides of the camp. They love gold and they love Bitcoin. And you have people who are avid Bitcoin haters and avid gold haters, right? But ultimately, when you compare apples to apples, both are very durable through time. Bitcoin is, of course, more durable, depending on how it's stored. Bitcoin is much more divisible than gold. Bitcoin is much more fungible than gold, right? And because of the reason being, because of gold's lack of easy verifiability, you don't know if the gold bar you're giving someone equals the gold bar you're going to buy a month from now, right? Bitcoin's portability, its verifiability, its scarcity. The only thing Bitcoin doesn't have going for it is hundreds of years behind it. And so it is an education gap, but I do think that fundamentally these two assets are part of the same trade, and that over a long enough time horizon, and this comes back to intellectual honesty, like we were talking about earlier with regards to Tucker Carlson, any intellectually honest person over a long enough time horizon, all of their narratives as to why Bitcoin is worthless or why it's an inferior store of value relative to gold will collapse, and they will eventually embrace Bitcoin. It's just a function of time. And you and I have seen this time and again. You've been in the space for years. I've been in the space for years. We just see the same talking points trotted out that are patently untrue. And it's our job to say that they are untrue again and again and again and again. So, it's something that's tiresome, but I believe the market will come around to this eventually, that these two assets are part of the same trade.
Yeah. I have a tip for everyone who wants to explain it to people. For example, on X, this week I kind of chose violence in the sense that I had some interesting discussions, and at one point I'm scrolling down what I said, but so I used grok a lot in my replies. So someone said like, oh yeah, SHA-256 is made by the NSA, so it's bad, Bitcoin bad. And then I just said, yo, Grok, explain SHA-256 and why it's irrelevant. And then it just says SHA-256 is a standard. So from now on, I'm just going to reply to uninformed Bitcoin haters by asking Grok to explain it like they're 5 or at a 70 IQ level. And maybe that helps to explain it in simpler terms. And I had some interesting discussions already using Grok to just go further, right? Like now I already kind of know what to say, but I'm just lazy with typing. So I just say like, Grok, explain X, Y, Z, and then it just explains it. And Grok is a crazy Bitcoin bull, actually. So that has really helped me a lot, just to give like quick answers and rebuttals to people.
That's encouraging. It's good to know that Grok's a Bitcoin bull. Speaking of some of gold's attributes and Bitcoin's attributes, one of the things you tweeted all the way back in, I think it was June, you wrote, when you understand Bitcoin as a protocol is akin to the English language and its code is like speech, you will understand that this concept of ideal money can't ever die. So, trusting code over people, this also ties into what we were talking about with Tucker Carlson. Why is Bitcoin the ideal money?
Yeah, I just mentioned it, right? Like when you understand that a protocol is just a set of rules that define a certain system as to how a certain system must work, then the step to understanding that conceptually can never die anymore, in my mind, is very short, right? The fact that over 16 years it manifested in this reality, right? So from a conceptual idea into the reality, and people actually started using electricity to create the blocks, to create the information on the Bitcoin blockchain that is immutable, right? I call that the engineered truth of Bitcoin. Bitcoin is in that sense engineered truth, right? So all the information in the Bitcoin blockchain is the absolute truth, verifiable by anyone and forever immutable of this money system, which surprisingly, after 16 years, is already more transparent than the fiat money system, or therefore any other money system that has existed before that. I think when you just stay there for a second and just, again, think about that conceptually. I don't know if I use the word conceptually in a good way. I feel like it could also be illustrative or like visually, right? Just think about how, if something like that would exist, and you know that the thing that already exists works in a certain way, right? Fiat money is debased infinitely. That's the whole underpinning of this system. Bitcoin is basically the total opposite of what we have now. I call it a mirror. Like Bitcoin is a mirror in that sense. Everything that fiat is, Bitcoin is not. And we just mentioned the scarcity, but also just the transparency, right? The whole the fact that you never learn what money is. I had a Leon Wankum on the podcast. I think you know him too. He does a lot with real estate. He's like a double master's in economics, and he said, "Yeah, I never learned what money is. Like I had a study and I calculated units. I think you had similar, but we never philosophically debated what money was, right? And so, if people that actually study for it don't learn what money is, how can general people understand what they're trading their finite time and energy for? And so why Bitcoin is better money is, I think, a difficult question to answer, in a sense that not a lot of people understand the problem that they have. A lot of people think that the money we have today, by the way, the money that you're forced to use in the country that you live in, right, is also an interesting characteristic, right? There is no free market for money, which, doesn't really make sense in my mind, as in, you would want the best representation of a reward in a value exchange. You want the best reward possible, basically. And if there are other entities that are composed of just other people, no better than you or me, that create the tool we need to use on the reward side of a value exchange, that instantly raises questions. How do they determine the value? How many units are there? What does it mean when more units are created? And this is obviously a very simplistic way of describing it, but it goes super, super deep when you see that no one really actually knows how it works, and no one really dives into it, not even in these studies that people follow. It's like there's like this layer, and they study this layer, but there's like this whole other thing that is below that. And I think that is why it's hard to explain why Bitcoin is better money, because before you propose a solution, people should understand the problem, right? But for me, the most important part why Bitcoin is better money is actually the scarcity, right? If there is something that always stays the same, basically, that's kind of how I view Bitcoin. Bitcoin is an economic constant, right? This idea of one Bitcoin is one Bitcoin, like $1 1920 is like 7 cents now or something like that, right? Or 9 cents, I don't know the exact number. But that's what you can buy with it. And that's the whole point of money, is that I deliver value, the market decides, or well, I think I try to deliver value, and the market decides if what I deliver is actual value, and they reward me accordingly or not, right? So if I bake cookies, I have a cookie store, my cookies suck, then my cookies don't have value, and I don't earn any money in my cookie store. If my cookies are great, I earn a reward, and I earn more because people tell other people that Bram has the best cookies. So I propose something to the market. The market decides if they want to reward me or not. And that is basically what everyone is doing. That's what you are doing. That's what I'm doing. That's what everyone is constantly doing. And that is great because people are trying to find their place in the world, their added value, what they enjoy, what they're capable of doing, etc. Right? But when the reward in the value exchanges that they're participating in is influenced by a third party, that influences the incentives of not only the person buying, but also the person that is offering this value proposition, right? And within the context of fiat money, if the money is constantly losing its value, you can conclude that the incentive for me to deliver value, to earn these units of money, also slowly erodes, right? I uphold myself to a certain standard when I'm getting a reward that is constantly losing its value. Now, if we switch to Bitcoin, and we know that there is an absolute finite supply of Bitcoin, then I have to actually deliver real value for someone who holds Bitcoin to part ways with the scarcest money to ever exist, right? The hardest asset to ever exist. And so it creates, and sometimes I say it forces, but I would say it forces you in a positive way to really, really figure out if what you do delivers value, if you are good enough. And I say that in the most positive way possible. Like, I think failure is good, right? Like, if you think you're a carpenter, but you're a shit carpenter, or you think you're a baker, but you're a shit baker, and you figure that out as soon as possible, that's a great thing, because that gives you the opportunity to focus on something else that actually might be the thing that is what you are good at doing in this world, right? Like, there are many people today that hate their jobs. You know, they don't want to go to their job. They suck at their job, but they still do it, or they try to weasel through, right? I once read a study that, like, in every big company, 5% of people are actively sabotaging, for example. Like, they have a job, but they're like active saboteurs. And like, stuff like that exists. And I would just wish for people to actually have an incentive, although it's forced upon them when we adopt Bitcoin, but again, in a positive way, to figure it out. And also, which is, I think, even more important, because the capital that they acquire, the Bitcoin that they have, doesn't lose value over time, they can actually fail at what they're trying to do, right? So if you want to become a stonemason, I don't know, and you have to like study for 5 years and apprentice for 10 years and whatever, let's say you still suck, then whatever the money was that you had before actually provided the time and space for you to try something out, to try something that takes a lot of time to actually learn, or perhaps takes a lot of time to actually build. And that is something that we don't see nowadays, right? Like, I always use the example of last year I was in Brussels or Antwerp. I was standing in front of like their old like central bank exchange, and it says like built in 1532. And I always thought, like, what has been built in my lifetime that I've seen that stands for like another 500 years? Like, there are people that worked on this building that perhaps never even saw it finished, right? Like, as with a lot of big buildings in the world. And like, that entire incentive is gone nowadays to do something big, or to learn something difficult, or to try something for a long amount of time, because the incentive just isn't there. You know, if you have a certain amount of money today, it's going to be less tomorrow already, let alone in 5 years, let alone in 10 years. So you're just not incentivized to do something great, big, or difficult. And I think if we use Bitcoin as money, or at least as the ruler, the measurement for value, that we value everything against Bitcoin, which is the only absolute finite, verifiably finite asset in the world, that is something that could actually occur. I would say that is what gives me hope. And I really want to like dive in more to this explanation in general, just to think through it, because I think this is what could make people enthusiastic, right? Like, it is not about how rich you are or how much Bitcoin you have. It is about protecting your time and energy. And that is the whole goal of money, in my opinion. The Keynesians would say something else, but that's it in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I think one of the chief differences between the two schools is that money should be a tool for storing time and energy in the Austrian school. Money should be a reflection of physical reality. And in the Keynesian school, money is a lubricant for the economy. Money is a lubricant for spending. Inflation is necessary because without inflation, people would stop spending money. The bottom line is that all that matters to us, an economy's prosperity, is gauged by how much money it's spending. Whereas in the Austrian school, it's not the case at all, right? It's individual prosperity. And so do you think that, based on what you just said, I think ultimately Bitcoin kind of realigns value with reality. It ties, money is supposed to be a communication mechanism. It solves for the lack of a double coincidence of wants. So we don't live in a barter economy. That's what money is. And so in the same way that if you only spoke Japanese and I only spoke English, we can't communicate with one another. But there's a common language for you and I, we can communicate, right? In the same way that if you have extra milk and I have extra eggs, but I don't want any milk and you don't want any eggs, there's no way for us to transact. Money will allow us to transact. It's representative of physical reality and a certain amount of different goods and services. Do you think, I ultimately think that Bitcoin, once again, attaches money to physical reality, which is what it's supposed to be, and therefore makes the best communication mechanism for value across time and space. I think, and ultimately with sound money as a result of that, a lot of the things you spoke about, the nihilism that everybody's facing today, the idea that why would I work my tail off if I have no say in the future, if it's not going to be toward anything? Why would I build a building to last 700 years when ultimately the materials for that are so expensive? There's no point in doing anything where the payoff will be after you're dead, right? It's lowered everybody's time preferences. It's made everybody net consumers who scroll TikTok and Instagram all day, and that's their lives. They've sacrificed their soul and their thinking and their prefrontal cortex and their critical thinking skills and their cognition for the sake of consumption because of the fact that money is no longer attached to physical reality. And that's led to, this spiritual rot that we're feeling. I mean, God is real and the devil is real as well. And so I think that ultimately more and more folks, like this spiritual rot that is within people, I think a great deal of it could be solved if money simply represented reality and it wasn't this grand manipulation scheme anymore. I don't know if your thoughts on that, if I was able to accurately capture what you said, but it's kind of where we are.
I fully agree. If you want, we can go further down the spiritual path.
Let's do it.
I think I have a nice bridge there. I had a podcast today. Every 2 weeks, I do a live podcast called Broadcast, where with Brian and Michael from OnRamp, we discuss like everything that stood out to us in the past 2 weeks. And I think it was Brian who brought a tweet by Luke Groman, who quote posted another tweet about how DraftKings bought some company, Railbird, and like this, prediction market, stocks, sports betting, etc. Like it's all converging, right? Like people are gambling. So Luke Roman tweeted, "View on the convergence of finance / investing and literal gambling through the lens of When Money Dies" by Adam Ferguson. So When Money Dies is a book from 1975 that describes the hyperinflation crisis in Germany in 1923. Luke posted an excerpt from the book, and I'll read it. And again, this is from 1975, talking about stuff happening in 1923. See if you see some commonalities in today. This excerpt says, "As the old virtues of thrift, honesty, and hard work lost their appeal, everybody was out to get rich quickly, especially as speculation in currency or shares could palpably yield far greater rewards than labor. While the anonymous, mindless republic in the shape of the Reichsbank was prepared to be the dupe of borrowers, no industrialist, businessman, or merchant would have wished to let the opportunities for enrichment slip by while others were making hay. For the less astute, it was incentive enough and arguably morally defensible to play the markets and take every advantage of the unworkable fiscal system merely to maintain one's financial and social position. As the position slid away, patriotism, social obligations, and morals slid away with it. The ethic cracked. Willingness to break the rules reflected the common attitude. Not to be able to hold on to what one had or what one had saved, little as it worried those who had nothing, was a very real basis of the human despair from which jealousy, fear, and outrage pretty wild." And so on my Bitcoin journey, stuff like this has been super high signal. Just realizing that the entire search for better money is not new. It is an age-old tale. And you can go back to the rhinestones, right? And the glass beads and the shells and all that stuff. For example, you know, the article Shelling Out by Nick Szabo, right? Like it goes through this whole history. This is just what people want, and it's logical. And also that the fact that at the end of a certain monetary system or a certain currency, it is looting the treasury and degeneracy on one side and nihilism, right? And it's exactly what we already just touched upon. It's like, yeah, it doesn't really matter what I do because my money is worthless anyway. And so today we see, I also saw a video this week about the CEO of OnlyFans saying like, oh yeah, we've already paid out like 25 billion with a B to creators in our whole of existence. And she was talking about it like, oh yeah, no, look, a great business and there's creators and stuff. Yeah, it's
disgusting.
Wild. Yeah, I know. It's wild, but this is where we're at. And so we can have like judgment about that. I don't think we even should go there, but the fact that it's happening is the signal, right? As I just read, like this is nothing new. This is what happens. This is also why, again, crypto got really big. Crypto got really big, and crypto is slowly killing itself because crypto is, in essence, Fiat 2.0. There is no incentive to create something of value. There is more incentive to just chase the bag, literally.
It's another form of this financial degeneracy you're talking about. Gambling in its many forms used to be a taboo pastime. If you think back to 1975, it was a taboo pastime. You did it in cigar rooms, you know, backstage in some back room at a lounge, and it was secret, or you did it in Las Vegas. Now people gamble on a daily or weekly basis. Whenever the football game is going, they put on a parlay. Whenever a major world event is occurring, now you can bet on it in real time through prediction markets. And with crypto, it's the exact same thing. There's no utility behind any of these things apart from Bitcoin whatsoever, Bitcoin and stablecoins. It's another form of gambling in order to try to get rich quick because, you know, they begin to understand, like that quote said in Money Dies, and then I'll pass the mic back to you, is that the value of your labor seems much less enticing relative to making a big bag of cash, putting it all on red, putting an 18-leg parlay on the New England Patriots, or doing something in prediction markets, or just aping into some worthless crypto token. Those are all more enticing than working hard because what you're being paid for is worth less at an accelerating rate when money dies, which is what we're living through right now.
Well, that's exactly what I meant before when I said like the incentive to create value is slowly eroding, but it's eroding. It's visibly eroding, right? And it's funny because like in crypto, it is under the appearance of legitimate business making and entrepreneurship and stuff like that. And I think the interesting thing for my journey into Bitcoin is that like now I'm like full-time focusing on Bitcoin, but like my previous career was all around like digital business, startups in very early stages. So like 0 to 1. And my mindset was always similar to what I just mentioned, just figure out the quickest way to fail, right? Like when you have an idea, you don't validate an idea by finding things that support your idea. No, you have to assume you're wrong because the amount of ideas that anyone can have is infinite. Basically, the amount of ideas that exist in the world are infinite. So you are probably wrong in your, connection and conjecture of assumptions and data and whatever. And that's okay. Like most ideas suck. So you have to go out there into the market to see if it sucks. And if you cannot confirm it sucks, then it might be something. So I always had like a different mindset to that. And so I've seen thousands of products and worked with hundreds of teams, and they almost all failed, which is good, right? Because most ideas suck. So that is great. But that showed me that it is very tempting for people to emulate that in crypto, basically. So when I found Ethereum at like $70 or 17, I don't even know, very, very early, later on, the ICOs came, right? And I thought like, oh, the ICOs, that's something I can do because those are startups and they raise money with crypto and they have a business plan or a deck or whatever. Like that was very close still. Well, it was quite close to VC startup. It was lighter in a sense that anyone from all around the world could invest in these ICOs, right? So let's say if VC is here, which is also a fiat money game, that's a whole different conversation. Crypto or like ICOs
Much
were like
lower barrier to entry.
We're like here, right? I funded like 15 neobanks. They all died, stuff like that. And I learned from that, of course, that slowly, it put me back on the Bitcoin track. After that, we got NFTs. The NFTs were even lower, right? So we went from like business plan to white paper, which was like a business plan, but only like 5 pages. In some cases, even 1 page. And people talked about community and coming together and having NFTs like access passes, stuff like that. Just talking about utility. But there I already saw that it wasn't, I'm building a system, I have users, they gain value from my system, therefore my NFT has value. No, it's buy my NFT, I'm going to build a system that eventually has users, and therefore my NFT has value. So it already was diluted even further. And then we got to pump.fun meme coins, which basically gave everyone the option to create any coin or idea infinitely. And then we've kind of gone through this circle where, if you agree that there's an infinite amount of creativity, an infinite amount of ideas, giving people the tool to create infinite amounts of meme coins or crypto coins actually dilutes the opportunity for possibly good ideas and good concepts to actually come to fruition. And so that made it clear to me that crypto basically killed itself by following that incentive that we just mentioned. It's just like, why should I build something of quality if I can just create the next bag, the next thing, right? And to tie that to the spiritual part, what is in that? What do you achieve? What kind of value or, again, achievement do you get from not building anything and possibly getting a bag? You know what I mean? Like it is just so far away from what I think about when I think about that building in Antwerp of 500 years old, or when I live in a city with a lot of old stuff. Sometimes like a bridge is renovated, right? And that's also a sign of the times. There's like these fences around because, there's work on the road, etc. So they're like protecting it, right? And sometimes there's these banners on these fences, and it says, like, there was one that I saw that said, like, not everyone can be a doctor or a lawyer. We are working here for you, blah, blah. And when I read that, I'm always like, what the hell? Like, I wish I could create a bridge, like something in a city that could be here for like the next 100 years. That's dope. Like, that is super cool if you can create something that lasts way beyond your lifetime. I think that is cool. And so it's like those things that I see where really this, I don't want to say I don't know if it's a contradiction. It's a misconception of what value is, a misconstruction of what value is, has like slowly creeped into our society and our mindset, and people don't really know what value is anymore. Value seems to be more money or something, or be richer, or be more famous. You also see that back in the convolution of price and value, right? Like those things are not the same, but people use them. They intertwine them a lot. And so I think losing the actual understanding of what is value actually erodes our motivation and incentives further. Like, what is there to achieve in life when you're 18? Well, when you're a woman, you can be a multimillionaire when you're 21, when you put your boobies on the internet. Maybe that's a nice career path. Like, that is actually what people are considering, and do whatever you want. But I don't think that actually helps the society as a whole. Let's keep it at that. And I also think that the people that are watching that, right, and they see a 21-year-old make 50 million in a year or something, right, like these OnlyFans girls. When they look at themselves and they think like, well, I just have a simple job at a supermarket, whatever, next to my high school, being in high school or starting college. Yeah, what's my purpose? What's my value? Why am I here? Why am I alive? Like all these things, I think, are a big threat to the spiritual level of people in general. Does that make sense? That was a rant, but yeah,
It does. No, it's good. I mean, ultimately, what's happened with our current fiscal regime in the United States is as the national debt increases, we are borrowing prosperity from our children, our grandchildren, and our future selves. And so the question then becomes, okay, would I rather build for the future if in the future I'm just going to continue owing and owing and owing? If what I'm building today will not last, then why would I work to build anything that lasts? And so they try to seek pleasure in the moment. And the idea of value has been distorted away from what can I provide to what can I take, right? And so that's why rather than building companies, more people than ever who move out of college are saying they want to become landlords because they can make a lot of money that way. That's all they're incentivized to do. Instead of their framework for the definition of value being, what can I use with the tools that God has given me to provide as much as I can and build for the future? They think, okay, how can I extract the most amount of value from other things? What is the least amount of effort I can put in for the maximum amount of extraction? And that's why gambling is so big. That's why so many people are drawn into things like e-commerce and this promise of being able to, flip things you buy from China for easy cash or OnlyFans or being a landlord. What has happened is within our monetary system, it's fundamentally changed human behavior and our definition of value. And Bitcoin is something that can fix that at the margin. I feel a relationship with God is also quite important. But Bitcoin as a denominator is very important because instead of looking at the value of your dollars and saying, okay, if I want to do something, I need to do it now. What's more worth my time, building a company or going all in on Polymarket, right? Doing a 19-leg parlay. If my money's going to be worth 10% less next year, I may as well try to get 10% off my dollars today. Versus if you denominate your life in Bitcoin, you understand that, my dollars are going to be worth more over time, or my capital is going to be worth more over time. Knowing that I'm actually effectively storing my energy for the future, what can I do today to provide value rather than extract value, right?
Yep.
So your denominator changes your behavior. If you're denominating your life in something that is losing value over time, you'll naturally be inclined to want to extract. If you're denominating your life and the way you view the world in something that is increasing and effectively storing your value over time, then your behavior is naturally inclined toward how can I provide? And I believe that Bitcoin can shift human behavior toward the service attitude, toward the mindset of what can I do today to help, to build for the future, rather than how can I extract today. I think that's fundamentally at the heart of what we're talking about.
Fully agree. Yeah, it's so funny because some people don't like it when you talk to AI, etc. Right? Today I had a pretty cool philosophical deep dive with Grok, actually coming from the CIA stuff. Like it doesn't matter; it's an open source computer protocol. And then we kind of like dove deep, and I asked it questions. I'm going to make a video of it, but at the end, I said, to sum it up in one sentence or statement, why should people study and adopt Bitcoin? How will it improve their lives and the lives of their children? Because you are right. Sometimes you see people that said like, on X, they say like, the US is 38 trillion in debt. But who do we actually owe it to? Why can't we just print it and like paint it over? And people don't understand it's your children. Like you borrow, if money is energy and you create money, you create a debt, you basically borrow energy from the future. That's the whole idea of credit, right? Like I borrow it from the future to apply it in the now to eventually, conceptually, create more value in the future, and therefore I can pay back the debt. But if in the meantime more units of money are created, you're basically running after all of this debt into perpetuity, right? And that's what you can also see on the usdebtclock.org. Like when you have a child in the US, there's already debt created for that child for things that that child will never see any value of.
The current number as of the new $38 trillion debt total is $109,000 per citizen.
Yeah, per citizen. Yeah, so that includes children, right? Taxpayers, it's even higher. So I asked Grok, so how would it improve their lives and the lives of their children? Can be practical, philosophical, or spiritual. And this is the answer. I want to know what you think. It said, study Bitcoin to reclaim sovereignty over your wealth and destiny through immutable, verifiable scarcity that no authority can dilute or seize. Practically, it hedges against fiat erosion, fostering prudent saving and intergenerational transfer of hard-earned value for your children's financial independence. Philosophically and spiritually, it elevates trust in eternal mathematical truth over fallible humans, awakening innate agency, and aligning life with anti-fragile principles that honor creation over consumption.
Well said. Creation over consumption.
That's it.
I think that's fundamentally the delineating belief between people who have a low time preference and believe in Bitcoin, or just sound money principles in general, right? Bringing it back to the gold folks, and consumption, which defines the fiat mindset, right? Because ultimately we are, with this debt-based monetary system, you're borrowing from your future self, from your children, from your grandchildren. I wholeheartedly agree. And there are so many other things we could talk about, but we're close to time here. And I just think this was a fascinating and wide-ranging discussion that is a departure from the norm of the typical Bitcoin podcast. We didn't talk about price once. We talked about how gold has done well, but we've talked mostly about the philosophy of Bitcoin. You helped us explore Bitcoin as a philosophy and a mirror, as you put it, a mirror on humanity itself, a mirror on your values. Phenomenal conversation. I loved it. We'll have to have you back on in the near future to continue the dialogue. But in the meantime, Bram, any parting thoughts, and let the viewers know where they can find more of your work?
Yeah, thanks so much. I really enjoy these types of conversations. I also try to have them on my podcast as much as possible. I think price is something that I actually rarely talk about because I eventually know it's going to go up, so I'm not really bothered by that. But like I said, I think understanding the problem is way, way more important than getting the solution pitched to you. When you are into Bitcoin and you want to get other people that you love, for example, to get Bitcoin, I think, really helping them to understand the problem. And you can do that in different ways, right? Like I like the philosophical approach with the energy and the time and that being diluted, right? And having uncertainty towards the future being that becomes more because the fiat money loses value all the time. Like that's kind of my approach. But I think that would be my biggest tip to give everyone, because just pitching Bitcoin as better money. Yeah. Why do I need better money? Like I have dollars or euros in my pocket. I have a card I can pay with, right? Like that doesn't really work, I think, today. So that's something that I always like to share. And where people can follow me is mainly on X. I'm Bram K at BRAMK. And my podcast is called Bitcoin for Millennials, that you can find on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, anywhere you get your podcast.
Excellent. So if you're listening on one of the podcast platforms right now, just type in the search bar Bitcoin for Millennials. And if you're watching on Twitter or YouTube, search at Bitcoin for Millennials or go to @BramK. All of that will be linked in the show notes as well. Bram, thanks again for coming on. Really appreciate it, man.